get my notes together. Love it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Girl Inside, the podcast which should not be a substitute for actual therapy, but kind of is. My name is Hannah Darkling. This podcast is brought to you by bangersandmash.site. Jump on, join the forum. We've got a book club started now, and Girl Inside is back. There was a hiatus for a while. What you guys don't know is that, firstly, the recording schedule and the release schedule of this podcast have no correlation to each other, because recording is one emotional effort and editing and posting is a second one, and they don't always happen. They don't always happen in a way that is conducive to getting things out quickly. And then secondly, I think it may have been, I'm going to say at least 9 weeks since I recorded a podcast that I was happy to edit and put out, but maybe 3 weeks ago I recorded a podcast. Let me tell you guys, it didn't go well. It didn't go well for anybody. Not for you would not have liked it. I didn't enjoy it. There were lots of tears. It wasn't. Isolation's been rough is kind of the takeaway from that. And yeah, that's when I realized I was like, I need to be doing some personal work before I'm jumping on and telling you guys about what's been happening in my life in quarantine, because the only thing that was happening was negativity, and that's not something that I want to share, and that's not something that I want to highlight in my life. I don't want to be making content and recording podcasts only when I'm sad. Yes, I want to have a conversation about mental health, but I don't want to be focusing on the negative stuff. I want to be focusing on the positive stuff. So I was like, I'll just wait to record a podcast. And now here we are. It's a couple of weeks later. Things are better. I don't really know what's changed. I'm not really sure what my coping mechanisms are right now, but some of them have worked, I guess. I'm going to read to you the notes. This is how we're going to start. I've got a lot of stuff to talk about, because I've had a lot of thoughts about things. I've got a lot of capital O opinions on things that I love to chat about. I've been spending most of my time on Twitter. But first, I'm going to read through just the dot points of what I spoke about in the podcast that shall never air, where I cried a lot. Here they are. A friend saying that somebody else was funny because they had childhood trauma, and me being angry that I also had childhood trauma, but that doesn't make me funny. Yeah, I said, I wish I was funny as this girl. And my friend going, oh yeah, but she had childhood trauma. That's why she's funny. And I was like, I have childhood trauma. That's actually unrelated to whether or not someone is funny. I want to be as funny as that person without putting the effort in, I think, is the key. So that was one of the things, and I started crying about that. And then one of the other ones was making friends online, and then 3 dot points. It feels like screaming into a void, not wanting to comment so people think I'm a crazy stalker. And then the 3rd dot point is hating everything I've said. So I think that maybe that, when recording a podcast about saying I hate everything I've said and I hate everything that I put out online and I regret it all, blah, 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 maybe that's why I started crying, because in the act of talking about how I don't like the content I've produced, which actually isn't true. That was a very depression mindset thing that I wrote down. That no wonder talking about that while in the context of this is a thing that I'm going to record and put online, of course that compounded and made me feel overwhelmed. And then the last dot point, there's another one. It says Christchurch earthquake, and I know what that's about, but it's not why I was crying. We started off light with an earthquake and then just got into childhood trauma, feeling irreparably lonely. And then the last dot point was, my content does not have to have value just like my body, which I think was maybe some of my coping mechanisms coming out, where I was writing these dot points for this podcast and going, this seems really depressing. How am I going to get through this? And then trying to be positive and turning my mindset around and being no, the value that my content has for me is that I'm saying stuff, I'm being real and authentic, and people can be like, that's #relatable, or not if they don't relate to it. And that's the value my content has. And there's so much crap out there. Do you know, and I'm not bashing on TikTok, because there's so much amazing stuff on TikTok, but TikTok, any video on Twitter, there's so much stuff out there that's just this is crap. YouTube videos, YouTube channels, my old YouTube videos, they're just bad. And nobody is how dare you make stuff? No. I mean, I think that's part of the problem is there are people like that on the internet, and I'm constantly just afraid that like a man with an opinion will come into my comment section and decide to tell me that I matter or don't matter. And that's why I had this full breakdown about like creating online content. And then so I stepped away, took a few more weeks. I think it was like a slow downward slide. I think it was probably like 8 or 9 weeks into a very deep depression, and then 2 or 3 weeks kind of back out of it to where I am now, where I did reach out, jumped on my IG stories and was like, hey guys, things are bad. Does anyone want to have a Zoom conversation with me? Spend a few weeks or maybe like 10, 11 days having chats and Zoom conversations with multiple people in my life, some of whom I would classify as my best friends who I just hadn't spoken to because of quarantine. And I tend to self-isolate when I'm in a negative place because I don't want to make my mental health issues somebody else's problem. And then also people who I haven't spoken to in years, which was also really lovely, and people that reached out and I didn't end up chatting to them on Zoom or on a phone call, but who in my Instagram messages responded to my story and were like, hey, like you're cool and funny. And I was like, oh, I am? Oh, and that was really lovely and wonderful to hear. And I sort of have this now mentality of, from kind of those dot points from that podcast that shall not be named ever, and that interaction of trying to get myself out of this negative space of actually putting my hand up, probably for one of the first times in my life, and being like, I'm really sad, can you help me? I really realized that so many people, especially online, and especially with people who maybe they aren't the closest friends with, a nothing reaction is actually usually a positive reaction. So if you watch a video online that you quite like and think is funny, I would say majority of the time people aren't clicking the like button. They're just going, oh, haha, that was great, close tab, right? They're scrolling through reading tweets and they're like, oh, yeah, that's funny. And then just like not retweeting it or not responding. They're just kind of not engaging with it. And so that like lack of response is quite a natural way for people to be like, oh yeah, I like this. Because if they didn't like it, they would unfollow or unsubscribe, right? And you know what? More power to you. If you don't like what I'm putting out, if you follow my personal Instagram and you don't want to see me crying in bed all the time, unfollow. My feelings won't be hurt. I've got like a professional Instagram for you to follow where I just talk about like the podcast I'm making and writing scripts. So I think that the nothing reaction is actually usually positive. And it's not until someone's like, hey, I'm in a really deep, dark place. Can you like pay me a compliment? Because if you don't, like, things are going to get worse and God knows what that looks like. People are like, oh no, I have all of these compliments for you. Of course. Didn't you know that? And it's like, no, I didn't know that. Absolutely, I didn't know that. Because my brain goes to, things are bad. No response is a negative response. Like, I guess that's the thing that I've learned from this experience is like no news is good news. If people are like following or subscribed or whatever the word is for whatever social media platform you're on, or they're at work and they don't walk out of the break room when you walk in and go, ugh, as you enter, like if they're there and they're happy to kind of like be around you in either real life spaces or online spaces, then that's a positive thing. Then they have positive feelings towards you. So that was a big learning for me because I'm like, people are following me out of obligation because we went on a Kentucky tour together 6 years ago. No, absolutely not. Because the people that I don't do that. I have unfollowed multiple people. Some people I still follow, but have them muted on either like their feed or their stories or Twitter or whatever, so that I'm like, seeing certain aspects of what they are putting out into the world, but not all of it, because like I'm interested in them, but not the minutiae of their day. And fair play, people I'm sure have done that with my stuff. And it's just like, I don't know, I just have this idea that like, yeah, but the way that I engage with social media is super different to the way that everybody else engages with my social media. So when they're ignoring my posts, it's because they hate me. But when I'm not commenting and not liking on their posts, it's because I do like them, but I'm not sure if we're friends enough for me to like every one of their posts, and I don't want them to think that I'm a psycho stalker. So it's different, when in actual fact, it's exactly the same. We're all going through the same stuff, and I'm just, when I'm in a negative place, I'm just like, yeah, but I'm extra sad and no one else ever gets it. Which like is depression and is a very valid feeling. But I think so much of that depression mindset that's really hard to get out of, and I'll be honest, not really sure how I did, is my sadness is not like anybody else's sadness. The depths of my despair are deeper than anybody else's despair they've ever felt. And my coping mechanism really was like, I didn't realize that what I was doing was a coping mechanism, was like, it was a cry for help, and not in like a healthy way. It was a really unhealthy cry for help, but like, thank God it worked. 'Cause like I'm here now having like a jovial chat about shit was hard. And you know what? Today is not a perfect day. My brain isn't the most amazing that it's ever been. Still have a lot of work to do to like climb out of that hole. My eyebrows are not symmetrical. They're not even, they're not twins, they're sisters. People say my eyebrows are barely even cousins today. Third cousins twice removed. But, things are bad still, is what I'm saying. You can have bad eyebrows, but be on the up and up. And it's only because I haven't put makeup on in 4 months. That's a lie. I've worn makeup like exclusively for this podcast for the last few months. It's really the only reason I've ever put makeup on, because we're not leaving the house. So quarantine. Here's my quarantine update. Maybe a month ago, was supposed to go back to the office. Was supposed to go back to work. I only work 1 day a week in this particular office. And I just said no. Initially, I was like, yeah, for sure. Really keen to. And I think I had that conversation on a Friday afternoon with my boss. And then Saturday, Sunday, Monday happened. And on Monday afternoon, I called and was like, I've been having panic attacks all weekend. I do not feel comfortable to come back to the office. I haven't left the house even for groceries. Like I guess people are calling it quarantine phase 1. And now we're technically in like phase 2 because everything reopened and then closed again, especially in Victoria and Melbourne. That's not my experience. My experience is that it's been locked down the whole time. During quarantine phase 1, it was my mum who was like, no, I want an excuse to get out of the house. I'm going to go and do Woolworths. And so I said, okay, you can do that. I don't feel comfortable leaving the house. Then there was a period in time where we were getting Woolworths delivered, and that's currently what we're doing. And I was supposed to go back to the office, and I was just like, I haven't left the house. And this isn't going to be the way that I leave the house, to go into like an enclosed space with recycled air with, 50 people who I don't know where they've been in the past 3.5 months. That sounds like a really horrible thing to say, but I don't know where they've been. And do I trust these people? And the answer was like, no, I absolutely don't trust them. And I was like, I'll come back, but I'm going to be wearing a mask the whole time. And this was before masks were even like a question in Australia. Like no one was wearing masks except people from probably Asian countries who had been doing it their whole lives. But, really that wasn't a question. And they were like, okay, you can come back and wear a mask if that's what makes you happy. And I was like, yeah, that is. But then I was having panic attacks. I said, look, I can't come in. I'm going to keep working from home. I worked from home for 2 weeks or 3 weeks maybe. And then I took 2 weeks off, partly because that was like, I was really depressed. I knew that if I like logged on to sit behind my computer for 8 hours to do a work from home day, I wasn't going to get anything done. I felt guilty. Like I'm not going to charge them for my time when I wasn't being productive. I wouldn't have been productive in those 2 weeks. And also because during that time, my mum went away. So currently I live in the house with my mum. My dad is in Queensland for his job and he's there locked down because of lockdown. And his job is still there. So he's going to be there for another few months. I don't know, a few years at least. I'm not sure. And we won't see him for a while until travel restrictions open back up. But my mum is a healthcare worker. And prior to lockdown, she was doing like secondments down past Melbourne in Apollo Bay in like, I guess, southern Victoria. I don't really know how southern it is. I've never been. And so they were like, look, we didn't want to have to ask you to do this because of lockdown, but somebody else had gotten sick, not with COVID, and she ended up having to go down for 3 weeks. And she was safe. Like she drove herself. She didn't have contact with anybody. Like she did like a remote check-in at the hotel she's at. Like she was really safe about it. And this was before the second wave had started. So it honestly was like, yeah, we're being safe, but Australia's getting close to eliminating the virus. And that didn't happen. And so while she was down there for 3 weeks, for a period of that, I was off work. So I was just like alone in the house for 2 weeks, being real sad. And when that happened, the numbers started growing again, specifically in Victoria, which is where my mum was. Even though she ended up being absolutely nowhere near the hotspots, it like still freaks you out. Like, I've never been there, so consciously being like, oh yeah, it's a 3-hour drive away from where the hotspots are, I'm still like, yeah, but if people are freely moving and going on long weekends because they feel like they can, yeah, so it just was a bit scary. And she came home, and actually just before, like a few days before she came back over the border is when they closed the border, so she had to obviously get the travel exemption, which she did because she could prove that she was only in Victoria for work and she was going to come home to the place where she lives. And after she came home, we now have to quarantine because, you know, I can't go anywhere. Like, I live in this house, regardless of how much contact my mum and I would have had. We could have planned for her to isolate kind of like in a separate room and try to use separate bathrooms. But she hadn't been in contact with anyone who had COVID. She was sending away tests. They'd all come back negative. So we were like, I mean, there's no point in us isolating from each other because the likelihood that she had it was so low. She didn't get tested. They had run out of tests in Victoria apparently, or something. I don't really know if that's correct, but she didn't get tested before she left. She wasn't allowed to. And so she came home, and then now we're quarantining for 14 days in this house. So like the lockdown that I'm currently in right now is worse than lockdown ever was, because right now I can't even leave to go for a walk at the local park. Like, I can't even do daily exercise, which is what lockdown version 1 was for everybody. That's not an option that I have right now. And so, yeah, I haven't come out of lockdown. Some people have like had gone to birthday dinners that I was like, I'm not going to that. I'm sorry, I love you, but I'm not going to attend. So yeah, that's the update on my lockdown and my isolation, is that it's still happening. I'm still in it. And I think that's probably why I went a bit off the deep end, maybe, because yeah, isolation breeds depression. And I was really like, everyone else is in a bad spot too. I don't want to bother them with my stuff. Not realizing that for both of us, me and them, being like, yeah, shit sucks and I'm sad and you are too and we get each other, is helpful for both parties. I was really like, it's selfish of me to reach out, but it's not. So if you're in a bad place, reach out to people who love and care for you. They are there, even if you think, we haven't spoken in 4 years. Because that's a story that I tell myself constantly. I'm like, it's so weird that people who like I haven't actually spoken to, like not even DM'd, in like 4 years. I think it's so weird that they follow me on social media. Why do they care what I'm doing with my life? And then I follow people that I haven't spoken to in 4 years. Like, I follow other people, but I'm interested in their life. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not interesting. So like, why would they care? But then apparently I'm interesting enough to give myself a podcast. Anyway. So now that we've gone through everything I said in the podcast that shall not be revealed to you ever, and given you an update on why I'm still in quarantine and what, you know, have I left the house? The answer is no. Since the 9th of March, I have only left the house I think I went to Bunnings for one trip, and I went to the local park for a walk, and that's it. And it's going to be like that for a while. I'm not sure about going back to the office once this 14-day lockdown is over. Don't know what's happening. So now I have all of these things that I have noticed while being just so online. That's like my whole thing now, is I'm just like a sad girl online. Noticed a lot of things and I wrote them down, and so I want to talk about them, and this might be a very long episode, or we might split it. Who knows? At this point, we cannot know the future. I can't know the future. You know the future. So really, that's the answer, is you already know whether I've split this. So there's no point in me being like, I might split this, because you already know. Do I leave this in? Fuck knows. Editing. So speaking of birthday parties that I didn't go to because of quarantine and self-isolation, and just it's a pandemic and I don't really know what's going on, so I don't want to be you can't be too cautious, I don't think. So there's a lot of people who had their birthdays during this quarantine period and are very sad because they didn't get to have a birthday party. They didn't get to hang out with their friends. They obviously either had to do something on Zoom or like postpone, or, you know, and everyone's like, oh, we're going to have a huge birthday bash when it's all over and we're all going to like celebrate 27 birthdays at once, you know. 27 dresses, we'll just parade them out and be like, and on this day, this person turned this age, and on this day, and we'll just all clap like it's a graduation, like a polite clap after every person's name, even though they always tell you not to because it wastes time. Families have got to be like, yeah, that's the person know. So we're going to do that when it's all over. But like part of me, I have a real issue with birthdays, and some of my closest friends will know this. I just like really, I have an issue. Birthdays are so important to me, and nobody seems to like notice that. And we're about to get into territory where like I could just be like a sad girl again. I don't want this to be a sad podcast. Let's just breathe right through this. So my birthday this year was before lockdown and quarantine happened, and I didn't do anything for it because none of my friends were like, hey, it's your birthday, let's hang out. And obviously I'm not going to organize something. It's my birthday. That sounds so dumb, but that's genuinely how my brain works. And that's what Girl Inside is about, is being like, what the fuck is happening inside that noggin, bitch? And the answer is a mess. The answer is a mess. So yeah, my birthday happened. I think I probably went to dinner with one person and that was it. And that was lovely. Like, that's a lovely thing to do, but like I didn't have a party, didn't really celebrate with my whole family because some of them were away, as I'm sure that you've gathered from this episode. My family's just all over Australia all the time. And then thinking back, and that was my 31st birthday. I turned 31 this year, and last year was my 30th, and I did absolutely nothing. I didn't even go to dinner with one person for my birthday on my 30th. I didn't celebrate my 30th birthday with my family, and in fact didn't even get a present from them, which was like a bit depressing. And when I mentioned that to my parents, I got the same gift as my brother on his birthday, which is 3 months later. So that was a whole fun scenario for my 30th, which is like, I already don't like, I don't like birthdays because they're so important to me, and I always know I'm going to get let down. And so there's something about hearing people being like, oh, I missed out on my birthday because of quarantine. I'm like, at least you have an excuse. I just missed out on my birthday because like, I don't know, no one wanted to hang out with me. No one thought it was important enough to be like, hey girl, I love you. Like, let's celebrate. They remembered because Facebook told them. And like, let's be honest, that's how I remember people's birthdays. I only remember people's birthdays because Facebook tells me. So I'm a total hypocrite when I say this. And as with most episodes of Girl Inside, it's me being like, people are complaining about something being sad, but actually I have it worse, which is not what I want this to be about. But I think that like talking about the dumb ways and highlighting how stupid it is that my brain goes into these patterns, like, yeah, it's dumb. And like highlighting that might make you feel like, oh yeah, I also have that dumb brain pattern. But also for myself is like, yeah, that's really dumb. Hey, when you explain it, do you hear how hypocritical you are? Yeah. So like you can be sad because your emotions are valid, but like maybe let's readdress this. So what happens when somebody has a birthday in quarantine? I mean, this happens anyway. It happens regardless of whether people are in quarantine or not, is that, but I've noticed it more like a resurgence of it in quarantine, is that people post Instagram stories of like, oh my God, this gorgeous bitch, it's her fucking birthday. And oh my God, I can't wait to be a crazy psycho drinking and boys with her because it's her bloody birthday and we fucking love her, babes. 75 emojis. I mean, I've overdone that, but really some of them feel a bit like that. And then the person whose birthday it is like shares them all to their own story. So it's someone's birthday and at like 5 p.m. on their birthday, you see them do the like mass repost or it was shared to their own stories. And it's just like every friend they have being like, this bitch, love her, with like cute photos of them together. And when I see that, I should think, oh my God, that's so cute. But what I think is, no one does that for my birthday because I have so much like heat around birthdays and so much like negativity around, I don't know, everyone tells you that like that's supposed to be the one day that everybody cares about you and everybody puts you first and they're like, it's your birthday, babe, we'll do whatever you want. But like that just doesn't happen for me, and I don't know how to make that happen. Like obviously a lot of the stuff that I spoke about at the beginning of this ep about like put your hand up and ask for help, like ask for what you want and you'll be given it. People are really happy to be like, oh yeah, that's what you need, I'll give it to you, I just didn't want to overstep my boundaries. So I don't know how to be like, can everybody just like make me the center of attention, please? How dare you have not done that already for 31 years? Like, I just find it so shitty and selfish to say that. But I want it. But also part of me is like, well, I only want it because other people are getting it. But also I want attention. Like I love attention. Everybody loves attention. And I think when people are like, you're just an attention seeker, I'm like, yeah, I am being an attention seeker right now. But that's because like I need it because I would like somebody to like acknowledge my existence. Sorry that like being alone is horrible. So that's where I'm at with quarantine birthdays, which is like, stop complaining that you didn't have a birthday party. We're obviously all going to fucking celebrate it when we get out of quarantine because like you've got a bazillion friends. I feel more sorry for me because I didn't have a birthday and I didn't even have quarantine as an excuse, is basically my point there. But like genuinely, I'm kind of sick of seeing people complain about like the most first world problems. Like, who gives a shit that you didn't have a birthday party? Who gives a shit that you like ordered pizza and like got on Zoom with your friends with like too much champagne? Like, that actually sounds awesome to be like, oh my God, it's such a shitty birthday. It's like, is it though? It's like, that sounds pretty fucking good. My camera is just being, you know what? I haven't recorded a podcast in a long time, and that's why, because I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, the problem with my camera shutting off randomly is that I ramble and I don't look at the camera, so I don't know what it's caught and what it hasn't and where to start from again. And it's like, I'm just trying to, the whole point of this is that it's a train of thought, and it's really like harshing my vibe, man. This shitty camera is really harshing my vibe. It's actually a wonderful camera. I think all of my memory cards, SD cards are being problematic. Where was I? So obviously I've been sad, and I spoke to quite a few people on Zooms and stuff, and then I spoke to people on Zooms. Oh my God, did I have chocolate on my finger? What the fuck? Why is there chocolate on my finger? It's brown goo. Where the fuck is that from? Ew. It's definitely chocolate. Where did it come from? Oh my God, I just licked it. Was that the worst decision? It tastes like nothing. It smells like chocolate and tastes like nothing, and it's brown goo on my finger from an unknown source. Was it on my phone? I didn't even eat chocolate today. Oh, actually, yeah, I did. I ate heaps of chocolate today. Anyway, the chocolate's now gone. I've now ingested it, and we need to move on. What was I saying? Welcome to the party, ADHD. So because I was sad, I was having a lot of Zooms. And also, like, I have other stuff in my life that I have to have Zooms for, like work-related and study-related and all sorts of stuff. So I was on a lot of Zooms, and it came to a point where people started being like, you look sad. And I was like, don't remind me. I know I'm sad. I don't need you to, like, make a deal out of it. Again, putting so much focus on, like, when I'm sad. I don't like that. I like want to be in contact with people when I'm happy. I don't want the only version of them, the only version of me that they know to be like, Hannah's sad and depressed and needs help right now. Like, that sounds so exhausting as a friend. And also not even just like to be a friend to someone like that, but like for myself and my own brain, like the moments that you dwell on are the moments that are highlighted. So I don't want to be going to bed every night being like, oh, here are all the sad and bad things that happened to me today. I want to be going to bed every night being like, here are the positive things. But if all I did all day was be on Zooms where I speak to people and they're like, you look sad. It's like, oh, I don't want to, can we talk about like some nice positive stuff? And then out of the blue, people started saying shit to me like, you know what, Hannah, you'll find someone. And I was like, sorry, what? We weren't talking about anything. What? Why would you say that to me? Like, firstly, that the only reason I'm depressed is because I'm alone in a romantic sense is like fucked up. But also, yeah, if you look at my private Twitter and yes, I'm just sad and horny online and I'm sad about being single and I talk about eating bread a lot. That is part of like my personal brand, but like that's for me. That's for me on my like weird private Twitter where I'm a duck, not on my professional Twitter, right? So maybe let's not talk about that face to face. I don't want to have a conversation about like, Hannah, you'll find someone. I'm like, firstly, what if I don't? That's okay. And secondly, like, no, I won't. We're in a pandemic and I'm not dating. I'm not getting on the apps. Like, it's not happening. And like no one I know already, no one I'm in contact with or am friends with on Facebook or Instagram. Like, I'm not dating either. Oh, I'm not dating any of them. Or if I'm interested, they're not dating me. They're not interested in it. So you know what? I probably won't meet someone, but that's okay. And also, what a weird thing to say, like, oh, I can tell you look sad. Don't worry, you'll find someone. That feels like weirdly confronting. And I think it probably reflects more on the person who said it than it does on me. But that was just a weird thing that happened that I wanted to share with you guys, because that's what this podcast is. It's like, here's some weird shit that I want to talk about, and I'm going to say it in a funny voice, because bloody hell, why not? I've put on weight. That was a note that I made. I've put on weight and I'm not interested in it. It's weird, like, the way that people talk about it, whether they're like, oh, you look better, or like, you look healthier, or like, okay, but does me looking better, if I'm skinnier, mean that I'm a better person or I have more worth when I'm skinny? And like, I know that I don't believe that, but do you believe that? Or are you just like using the wrong choice of words? But like, then if somebody else overhears it, it's going to like give them a complex about their weight. And it's just like, there's no way to talk about weight in a way that, I'm not really worried that I've put on weight. I 100% know why, because I'm eating like shit, but also it's just, let's just get through this time. And I know I have the skills to like get back to a place where like I'm exercising enough for my body after this. Like, so I'm not really worried about like, I've put on weight, but I am worried about the way that we talk about it and the way that it became a real focus in quarantine of people being like, oh my God, I've put on weight. Oh, quarantine. It's like, okay, and we're going through a global trauma, you know? It's okay to put on weight. It's okay to put on weight if you're not going through a global trauma. It's okay to put on weight just like because things are good, you know? But yeah, a weird conversation that I was kind of like in the middle of was two people discussing how to talk about my weight loss or my weight gain more specifically. And like, oh, but you look so much better last year. No, you look so much healthier last year. No, use this word, use that word. And I just was like, how about we stop talking about it? Because it's going to give me a complex. And I didn't have a complex about it until this conversation went on for way too long. So that's something else funny and weird that happened that I thought I'd share with you. Anyway, guys, I have so many more things that I want to discuss about what's been happening in quarantine, but I feel like this episode's getting quite long. And then also my camera keeps turning off, which is just frustrating the shit out of me. So we're going to stop recording here. I can see it's about to turn off again and I don't know what to do about it. So thank you guys for spending this time with me. I hope that you're doing well in whatever version of quarantine you're in. If you're in Melbourne, I know it's really hard right now. If you're somewhere else in Australia, still be safe and cautious. If you're in New Zealand, fuck you guys. You did the right thing, but that's because your leadership is better than ours. I'm going to stop this now. Also, my throat is really sore at this point because I have been quite literally screaming at the top of my lungs at this camera because it keeps turning off. I would say it's probably turned off at least 10 times. It's about to do it. Love you guys and you're a babe, and I'm back, I guess.